Hello, this is Gabriel, custodian of Watchman Privacy. Listen, I know why you're here. You're looking to escape the technocratic apparatuses that you see slowly enveloping you and restraining your freedom. In that case, the best thing you can do before listening to this episode is to visit escapethetechnocracy.com to purchase my privacy course on getting off the grid. This course is for everyone. It's the best privacy tutorial on the internet, and our shop has other things as well, books and toolkits and consulting, and we accept Monero and actual privacy throughout the checkout process. I do not take sponsors. I'm not part of a company. I don't have someone to answer to. So unlike 99.9% of the people who talk about their subject, you can know that I'm pursuing the unmitigated truth as I see it. Go support you and me at escapethetechnocracy.com. All right, hello everyone. This is Gabriel Custodian, and I'm just here by myself talking, and I don't have a script in front of me. This is the first time I've ever done this. No joke. I've always either had a guest or I've written something out and read it. So this is probably fitting that I'm doing it this way, because in this episode I'm going to talk about 10 things I learned from Michael Bazzell. And Michael Bazzell always did this kind of format, or almost always. He just turned on his microphone, had Audacity playing, which I'm looking at the Audacity program right now as I speak. And he just talked for 20 to 40 minutes about topics that interested him. And it was a very useful way of doing things. So who was Michael Bazzell, for those of you unfamiliar? Michael Bazzell was the best privacy teacher that has ever existed. I think that's fair to say. I've learned about 90% of what I've learned about privacy from Michael Bazzell. I haven't really had many other teachers, and as I look at the options available for privacy tutorials, there's really nobody. And in fact, I tweeted out something the other day, which I had been discussing with a friend who was also very interested in privacy. We had Michael Bazzell in common. And this friend basically said, I asked him, I said, hey, what other privacy stuff do you listen to? And he said, nothing. Now that Michael Bazzell is done, he doesn't listen to anything. Now, this is somebody who is very tech savvy, who's very interested in these topics, but he has found nobody else who is worthy of listening to. I didn't ask him if he was listening to me, by the way. Hopefully he is. Hopefully he was, but maybe he isn't, because I don't claim to be as good as Michael Bazzell. And by the way, when I say that I learned 90% of what I know about privacy, I mean in my initial, study of privacy. Obviously, I've learned a lot by myself and through other means in the previous many years. But this really struck me because I think I feel the same. There's not a single privacy teacher out there who I follow, who I'm pleased with. There's some useful tidbits here or there. And you might be saying, well, what about this? Probably I've listened to this person. Probably I've followed this channel or this website or what have you, and they're not good. They're not good enough, frankly, just to be perfectly blunt about it. And as we go, and by the way, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I am the solution here. I'm simply relaying a fact that I think Michael Bazzell was at the top of the game, and it's unfortunate that he's gone. And there's just a vacant hole where he used to be. So who was Michael Bazzell? In case you're not familiar, he was a allegedly former FBI investigator who learned a lot of handy things from his time in the FBI, and he was a advisor to the Mr. Robot show, which, if you're not familiar, it's a inventive show on hacking and OSINT and these sorts of things, and he was an advisor for that show. So clearly he was knowledgeable and is knowledgeable, and he had a show. It was called the Privacy, Security, and OSINT Show. And this stopped in 2023. Michael Bazzell came kind of out of nowhere and just said that, or didn't even really say, if you listen to some of his final episodes, he kind of just disappeared. A lot of people thought that it was certainly rude, and I can understand that. Michael Bazzell was, though, a very hardcore guy and a very quirky guy, so it was kind of within him to end in that way. And who knows, he might come back. My guess is that he has some other really good things going for him, and maybe it involves him withholding certain of his advice that he was giving to the public. Perfectly acceptable and understandable, probably private clients if I were to guess, but that's none of my business and no need to speculate too much. So beyond this show, Michael Bazzell seems to have funded the show primarily through the sale of his books. And he had a number of books that he wrote on Kindle Direct Publishing, or I believe he used the predecessor to KDP, and he also had the other indie publisher. But all of his books were available through Amazon, and he made them exclusively available hardcover or in physical form because he didn't want to support all of the Kindle nonsense. And he wrote these amazing books, which you can still buy. He still keeps going with the books, and the books are excellent privacy resources, frankly. I mean, if you're serious about your privacy, that is really where you should be starting, is with his book, Extreme Privacy. He's had a number of editions, and so those are an excellent resource as well. So let's get into this. I'm going to give you 10 things that I learned from Michael Bazzell. Number one is practice what you preach. The reason why this guy got so many views, so many millions of listens throughout his career, to the point where he no doubt got a ton of clients and a ton of feedback and a ton of sales from his audience. The reason why he is so beloved is because he lived out everything that he talked about. Everything about having a house without a connection to your name, everything about obviously not showing your face, everything about private purchases and all the rest, not having a functioning phone anywhere near your house, hiding your license plate until you are miles away from your house, or certainly down the road, so that you're not scanned by any scanners in the neighborhood and that license plate is associated with your particular area. All the work that he talked about regarding having a firewall with a router at the, with a VPN at the router level. He clearly did all of that. He was very knowledgeable about it. Everything about having supreme privacy with medical procedures, as far as you can go. Everything about hiding his face when he went in to purchase new phones, for example. You could tell from the way the guy talked that he was doing everything that he preached. He was very clever not to reveal anything about his personal life, or very few things. And it was very clear. Like, I don't see anybody out there who I say, hey, this person practices what they preach. And I think that is a way of evaluating somebody, honestly, is you're out here talking about privacy, but it's pretty clear that you're not actually going the distance to do all these things. I've tried to do my best to practice what I preach. Obviously, I have some big tech accounts that Michael Bazzell probably wouldn't approve of. He's not on YouTube, etc. But for me, I'm trying to build an audience. I'm not sure exactly how he got such a large audience that he, I guess, didn't really need to use some of the big tech. But still, I'll give the guy credit. He definitely practiced what he preached, including, you go to his Twitter profile, and he's using a program in the background of Twitter, no doubt, to delete all of his tweets. He follows nobody. This guy has said on his show that if you were to find his house and go inside, there's nothing inside that would reveal him. He said that he hasn't stayed in a hotel in his real name in many, many, many years, and I certainly believe him. So this guy was serious about his craft, and I can appreciate that. Second thing that I learned from Mike Bazzell is that we don't have to talk in terms of threat models, right? This is one thing I really hate about the privacy world. Is it's just a catchphrase. It's something that people bring up because they don't really have anything else useful to say, as they say, oh, but what's your threat model? And the reason I don't like this is because I think that if people are really serious about privacy, they want to go the full distance. And Michael Bazzell understood that, and he showed people, and he always talked about going the full distance, right? Not let's go this little bit. No, let's dive all the way in, and let's try to figure out how to remove every single tracker from our MacBook. And then, of course, go to Linux, or how to really buy a house with no attachment whatsoever to our name. So he was always interested in going the full limits. Sure, I'm sure he talked about threat models, but the way he wrote and the way he talked, it was very clear that he understood that we can go all the way, and there's nothing wrong with going all the way. And I think a lot of people respect that in a world with participation trophies, and that's all threat models are, is, hey, you failed, here's your participation trophy. It's called a threat model. And that's something that I will always try to do, is show people how, okay, let's try to go as far as we can. That doesn't mean that you have to be extreme and serious and not hold out your hand to the people starting the journey. But as soon as they start the journey, we can say, hey, you did this, now let's do this, now let's go all the way. And there are a lot of people out there who are looking to have the ultimate threat model, which is protection from just about everything out there. So I always appreciated that about Michael Bazzell, and I don't really see that from a lot of other people who would rather lecture you about preserving your mental health than actually give you what you want, which is a mission, which is a something to accomplish. And obviously, people can make their own decision about how far they should go. There are levels of toxicity when you get too extreme about privacy, but most people are not going that far. And we don't really need to lecture them, the peons, as I'm sure a lot of people think in their head who talk about threat modeling, about how they're going too far. No, people know when they're going too far. We don't need to stop them before they get to that point. Third thing that I learned from Michael Bazzell is focus on physical privacy, as well as, things like legal privacy. If you search for privacy tutorials online or anywhere these days, basically what you're looking for is people playing around with various private apps, okay, private digital stuff. It's not that that's not important, but that's only one category of life, right? And it doesn't really matter how savvy you are on your Linux computer if you're doing other stupid stuff and you have your apartment in your name and your utilities in your real name and you get doxxed, right? So here I'm reading from Michael Bazzell's book. We have chapters on alias names, mailing addresses, private payments, and these are not all digital, by the way, estate planning, employment, private lodging, private homes, private vehicles, privacy lifestyle, nomad lifestyle. So at the end of the day, privacy, physical privacy is ultimately real privacy. And Michael Bazzell understood that, right? This is a guy who dealt with a lot of victims of all kinds of things. And that was kind of his job, consulting with these people and helping them to leave abusive situations. And frankly, not a lot of people talk about that. There's really not much good information on that. People are just content to, as I say, in other episodes, go for the low-hanging fruits, talk about the latest whatever app, right? But this is not real privacy. Digital privacy is not real privacy. Real privacy is hiding your physical location from your threats. It's about learning to use a different name in the heat of the moment. It's about handling social interactions, which we all have to do in a way that preserves our privacy. It's about having a private location that we can go home to at night without anybody knowing. It's about hiding our face from facial recognition when we're out and about. It's about hiding our license plate from the license plate scanners. So that is real privacy. I always appreciate it about Michael Bazzell. If you pick up his book, Extreme Privacy, he talks about nomad residency. He talks about, he goes into a good bit of depth on private housing and things of this sort that he's gone more into detail more extensively in his show. He makes that a very big component. And it's not that he doesn't talk about digital privacy, but when he does, it's very targeted, it's very direct, and it's certainly not the majority of what he discusses. Digital privacy is secondary, and he understood that, and I definitely agree. Fourth thing that I learned from Michael Bazzell, don't go into a lot of the privacy communities online. If you go there, you're going to find a lot of really uninformed people who are LARPing and who have really childish and infantile ideas about what privacy entails. Obviously, there's a lot of fighting, bickering, whether that's privacy Reddit or any other forum that you could really go to for privacy. We know this is the case, that in these communities, nothing of value really comes out. And it was pretty clear that Michael Bazzell got his ideas from other avenues, right? He was more plugged into the signal than others, and he was reading books and studying and really practicing out in the field. That was really where it was at. You could tell that he would sometimes dip into some of these communities, but otherwise he would avoid them. And this is something that I've certainly done. Every time I check something like privacy Reddit, I just feel like my IQ drops considerably. And not just because of the regular nonsense of online, it's just because people in these communities really just don't understand. And they're really disconnected from life. And that's why they're there, is because they are disconnected from life. They're not out practicing these things. Okay, a fifth thing that I learned from Michael Bazzell, and here I've been too kind about him, so let me get a little bit of a negative thing in here. Recording has been removed. Number 6 thing I learned from Michael Bazzell is the importance of going out into the field. This is really a big differentiator of Michael Bazzell and all the other would-be privacy influencers, is that it was very clear that Michael Bazzell went out and tested these things on the regular. So he was very much at the front line. In fact, there's plenty of things that he held back and he's never shared publicly, a lot of his strategies that he has with his private clients. And this is a guy who had a FBI background, so he knew he had a baseline to start from, and he simply continued that and developed it through the very dangerous practice of helping clients who were in need of escaping from tricky situations. So this guy was out there risking it, risking his life, and developing these strategies of private housing and nomadship and getting mail in a private way. And all these little details, he was out there in the field doing them. And I just don't see anybody doing that. I really don't see anybody out in the field. It's just a lot of rehashing of information, a lot of having guests on. And look, I'm guilty of that as well. And again, I'm not saying that I'm the solution to Michael Bazzell. Remember, this episode is partly saying that there's a huge gap. And I really wish we had somebody who was out there going into the field, testing out these strategies. Sure, if you want to put it behind a paywall, that's fine. Happy to pay for such information. But that's really valuable because it's not rehashed information. It's actually original contributions to the field. Number 7 thing that I learned from Michael Bazzell, the importance of having books, of having manuals. So the majority of advice that Michael Bazzell ever gave to the public was not through his podcast. It wasn't through video tutorials or anything like this. It was through his books. And his extreme privacy book, I have calculated, I believe it's about half the word count of the King James Bible. So this thing is massive. It's huge. I've obviously read it to cover many times, every edition. And there's a ton of information that you can put into text that you cannot put into a podcast. And maybe you can't put into a video course as well. So I think he could have benefited from having video courses. This is a direction that I've taken, but there is a whole lot of value in books, and people simply like books. And when I look at the field, I see very few books on privacy that are published out there. And that's just, to me, another indication that there's a lot of rehashing, a lot of amateurism, frankly, in the field. Because if you have good ideas and you want to flesh them out in a serious way, you're going to put it in book form. And I'm going to say this, and people are going to take offense to it. I don't really care. If you know me, I don't really care what you have to say. I'm just going to say things that need to get said. And that is that listening is not the same as reading. I can always tell if somebody has learned primarily through listening as opposed to reading a book. It works on the brain differently. It really does. And you're not consuming as much information when you listen as when you are forced to read a book. It works on a different part of the brain, and you can accumulate a lot more information when you read. So I think that if you're not reading the books on privacy or your topic, you're really missing out. And so I learned from Michael Bazzell the importance of having written work, and I hope to be in a position to do more writing in the future myself. Number 8 thing I learned from Michael Bazzell is don't avoid particular privacy tools for too strict of ideological reasons. I hear a lot of people who ask me, hey, what do you recommend, this and that? And I tell them, hey, MySudo is a useful tool for additional phone numbers. And they say, they don't accept Monero. Who cares if they don't accept Monero? It's a useful tool. You use the tool. It's one of the best tools that you have to receive phone calls and texts and to have multiple numbers in one place. Very convenient. It works very well. There are ways to purchase it privately. You can get a gift card to Google Play Store or the Apple Store and go about it that route. Oh, I don't want to support Apple. I don't want to support Google. Well, then you don't have the most useful privacy tool at your disposal. Or I hear people say about his books, Michael Bazzell's book, oh, he doesn't accept crypto. I'm not going to read them. All right, so you're cutting yourself off from the best privacy resource because he doesn't accept Monero. Does that seem wise? Michael Bazzell had no problem supporting a big tech company here or there or using some fiat here or there if it would lead to a better privacy strategy. And I think that is a lesson that we all should learn. If you're too ideological about these things, you're not going to have access to the best tools. It's pretty simple. Number 9 thing that I learned from Michael Bazzell is don't underestimate the value of social techniques for privacy. This was a guy who had developed by necessity a very keen way of social manipulation, let's just call it, right? He is at a hotel lobby and he does not want to give his real ID. And so he has all these lines about how he forgot his ID. Can he bring it to the desk later? Or he has a ID card that looks like a gym membership and he says, this is all I have for the moment. It's clear that he practiced these quite a lot. And frankly, if you can manipulate social situations, you can gain a lot of information. You can bypass a whole lot of stuff. So you can't afford, if you're being serious about privacy, you can't afford to be socially awkward. You have to have these techniques. You have to practice these techniques, and you have to have them in your toolkit because they can certainly help you circumvent a lot of the situations where you do have to interact with people. You do have to interact with human beings who are requesting your information, and you have to tell them no in one way or another. And getting around it in a clever way is a very great contribution that Michael Bazzell discussed in his podcast and certainly in his books. Number 10 thing that I learned from Michael Bazzell is do not, if you want privacy, be a public figure talking about privacy. It was fairly clear as his show and as his brand went along and as he had more of his voice out there that he came to regret actually having such a strong presence out there. And I think when we look at the way that he left the scene and deleted all of his previous podcast episodes, you're going to have a lot of trouble tracking those down. If you are interested in his show from this episode and you try to go track them down, they're not there. And so this is a guy who, as he got to the end, thought that, hey, I care a lot about privacy. I've spent so much time talking about things that have no doubt revealed characteristics about me and put me on the public record about all kinds of things. I think he came to regret a lot of that and probably, no doubt, right now has a lot more enjoyment in working with most likely targeted private clients, small companies, businesses, things of this sort. I'm sure he's having a good time. And yeah, that is the rule. If you really want privacy, don't be doing what I'm doing right now. Don't be exposing your voice, assuming this is my voice, and anything else like that. So Michael Bazzell, I salute you. I know that we have had some less than cordial interactions on Twitter. That's just how things go sometimes, but I salute you. You are the OG of this domain. I hope we'll find more people in the future like you. I hope you'll come back, honestly. And I'm doing my part to become more comprehensive and more outgoing and more experimental and in the field in my own brand. I hope to develop that. So thank you for your service. Hey, thanks for listening. Look, I could use your help real quick. If you could share this, engage with me in some way, leave a review anywhere. This really helps me to break the technocratic shadow banning that is happening with my brand. And of course, if you really want to escape the technocracy, go to escapethetechnocracy.com. Privacy tutorial series, books, consulting, and of course, you can leave a donation. Thank you very much.